The movie begins by showing a desert-like place where the heat is intense and the ground has cracked apart because of the blazing sun. In this extreme heat, a group of boys was working there. They were mainly digging the ground, but at that moment, a poisonous snake appeared. One of the boys working there noticed it. This boy was extremely frustrated with his life. He had suffered so much that he no longer had any desire to keep living. So when he saw the snake, he deliberately moved his foot toward it. He wanted the snake to bite him so that he would die, and just then, the snake bit him. As a result, the boy died immediately from the venom. Meanwhile, we are introduced to a boy named Stanley. Stanley was walking down the road on his way to somewhere, but suddenly a pair of shoes fell on him. As a result, Stanley fell onto the street. Stanley's father was working on a research project. He was actually trying to invent a special product that could remove bad odors from shoes. So Stanley decided to take the shoes home for his father, but while he was on his way, a police car suddenly showed up. The officers quickly surrounded Stanley from all sides, because the shoes Stanley had picked up actually belonged to a famous baseball player. They had been stolen during a charity event, so the police believed that Stanley might have stolen the shoes. As a result, they immediately arrested him. The officers then went straight to Stanley's house with him. This was the place where Stanley's father carried out all of his research work. Because of that, the entire house was filled with different research equipment and material. And when the police saw all of those things, they became even more suspicious. They started thinking that Stanley and his father might be involved in some kind of illegal activity. Besides that, there were many more shoes inside Stanley's house. At the same time, Stanley's room was filled with pictures of basketball players. Based on all of this evidence, Stanley was taken directly to court, and when all the testimony was presented in court, Stanley was found guilty. After that, the judge considered Stanley's age and gave him two options. The first option was to go to jail. The second option was to spend up to 18 months at Green Lake. There was a camp for prisoners there. And unlike a regular prison, the inmates were not locked up all the time. They were allowed to move around the surrounding area freely. After hearing all of this, Stanley chose the Green Lake option, so Stanley was taken alone on a bus through the desert on the way to Green Lake. He felt very scared because it was the first time he had ever been so far away from his family, and to him, this place felt very strange. He felt as if some curse placed on his family was the reason why this was happening to him, even though he was innocent. Stanley noticed that there were hundreds of holes spread across the entire desert. He could not understand what those holes were for. At that moment, he also saw a man standing in the middle of the desert with a horse. But a few moments later, the man suddenly disappeared. Stanley realized that it had only been his imagination. And after traveling for several hours, they finally arrived at a small camp, which was actually a prison camp. There were many other inmates there, just like Stanley. After arriving, Stanley met a man named Mr. Sir. He worked for the warden of the camp. In other words, he followed the warden's orders. When Mr. Sir heard Stanley's name, he started laughing because he thought Stanley's name sounded funny. Stanley then told him that his ancestors had chosen that name with great care, so he actually liked his name very much. But Mr. Sir had no interest in anything Stanley had to say, so he took Stanley around the camp and showed him everything, and he also explained all the rules and regulations of the place. Mr. Sir told Stanley that this prison camp was completely different from other prisons in the world, because there were no clocks to tell the time. There were not even any calendars to keep track of the date, so no one could ever tell how many days they had already spent there. Besides that, there was absolutely nothing for miles and miles around this place. Even if someone traveled thousands of miles, they still would not find anything nearby. And this place was located in such a remote area that almost nobody even knew about it. That is why the prisoners were not kept behind bars. Instead, they were free to go wherever they wanted within the area, because even if they tried, they could never escape from this place. And for that reason, none of the inmates dared to run away, even though there were no walls or fences around the camp. After that, Mr. Sir gave Stanley 2 sets of clothes. He also gave him a pair of shoes. Along with that, Stanley was handed a shovel. Mr. Sir then told Stanley that starting today, he would have to dig a hole in the middle of the desert every single day. The hole had to be about 5 feet deep. and he could use his shovel to measure the depth of the hole. However, the longer it took him to finish digging, the longer he would have to stay under the scorching sun, which was a very painful form of punishment. And besides digging holes, he would also have to protect himself from snakes and other poisonous creatures, because every part of this place was filled with dangerous animals. A single bite from one of them could kill a person within moments. After hearing all of this, Stanley became very frightened. A little later, the camp counselor came to meet Stanley. His name was Dr. Pendanski. At first glance, Dr. Pendanski seemed like a very kind person. He then took Stanley with him to the back side of the camp. As he showed him around, he said, "By now, you've probably learned all the rules of this place. But do you know the most important rule here? Most inmates don't know about it at first, but I'll tell you. The first rule of this camp is never to speak against the warden and to quietly tolerate whatever the warden does. Otherwise, the consequences can be very serious." After that, Dr. Pendanski took Stanley to meet the other inmates. Together, they showed Stanley his bed. The bed was extremely dirty. Stanley then learned that the inmate who had used the bed before him had apparently been very sick. That was why the bed was in such terrible condition. However, that inmate had died a few days earlier. Dr. Pendanski always called the inmates by their real name, but the inmates called each other by different names, because after arriving here, everyone ended up getting a nickname. Interestingly, almost every inmate in the camp was under 18 years old, and the youngest boy there was a kid named Zero. Since he was the youngest, everyone called him Zero. Zero always looked sad, and ever since he arrived at the camp, he had not spoken to anyone. A little later, Stanley called one of the boys by his real name, and he asked him where the camp cafeteria was. But the boy became very angry when Stanley used his real name. He walked over and started hitting Stanley. Then he shoved him to the ground, and he told Stanley never to call him by his real name again. Instead, he should use the nickname that had been given to him at the camp. The boy and his friends then started laughing at Stanley. After that, Stanley went to the cafeteria to eat. There, the inmates were served a thin stew made from spoiled vegetable. Stanley had a hard time eating that kind of food. While Stanley was sitting there eating, a boy named X-Ray took some food from Stanley's portion, and he said, "Everyone here gets a measured amount of food, but I need more food because I've been working hard all day. You just got here today, so you haven't had to do any work." Stanley couldn't say anything against them. Then X-Ray and the others asked Stanley why he had been sent to the camp. They wanted to know what crime he had committed. Stanley told them that he had stolen a famous baseball player's shoe. At that moment, the young boy named Zero was also sitting there. For the first time, Zero spoke to Stanley. He asked, "The shoes you stole, did they have a star symbol on them?" Stanley replied, "Yeah." Just then, Stanley remembered something from the court hearing. When the famous baseball player had been giving his testimony in court, he had said that he had grown up without parents. He had been an orphan since childhood, so he had grown up in an orphanage. Because of that, he had a special connection to orphanages. That was why he had donated his shoes to an orphanage as a charity gift. And this baseball player was actually one of Stanley's favorite athletes. That was why Stanley even had pictures of him in his room. But during the trial, people said that Stanley was nothing more than a fake fan who had stolen his idol's shoes. That accusation hurt Stanley deeply. Later that night, when Stanley went to sleep, he started thinking about his grandfather. Both his grandfather and his father were also named Stanley. His grandfather's name was Stanley II, his father's name was Stanley III, and his name was Stanley IV. That was how the naming tradition had continued in their family. One day, Stanley's grandfather told them that their family was supposedly cursed. Because of that curse, none of the men in their family could ever succeed. According to him, that was also the reason Stanley's father could not succeed with his inventions. His grandfather also said that Stanley, "I had incredibly bad luck. At first, he had made a huge amount of money in the stock market, but shortly after his success, he was killed by a famous criminal named Kate. The criminal's full name was Kissin' Kate. She was a psychopath who would kiss her victims after killing them, and every victim would be left with a kiss mark on their forehead. But when she attacked Stanley, though, she did not kiss him. Instead, she took all of his money and ran away. Then she left him behind in the middle of the desert. The story then returns to the prison camp. Early the next morning, Stanley and the other inmates were woken up. They were forced to get up before the sun had fully risen. After that, they were given a special type of bread to eat. It filled their stomachs only a little. Then everyone was allowed to choose a shovel for the day's work. Like everyone else, Stanley picked out a shovel that he liked. But then the boy named X-Ray came over and took Stanley's shovel away from him, because that shovel was slightly smaller and much lighter, which made it a lot easier to work with. Just then, another inmate told Stanley that X-Ray took that shovel every single day. He never allowed anyone else to use that shovel. After everyone had chosen their shovels, they were loaded into a truck. The truck then took them to an empty area. That was where they had to dig their hole. Mr. Sir once again explained Stanley's job to him, and he told him that if he ever found anything interesting while digging, he should quietly report it to him. And if Mr. Sir liked whatever Stanley found, then Stanley would get the rest of the day off. Stanley then asked, "So are we digging these holes to look for something?" Mr. Sir replied that they were not digging for any particular object. Instead, they were made to do this as a punishment. The idea was that the punishment would help them reflect on their mistakes and become better people. After Mr. Sir left, all the inmates got to work. Everyone dug holes in their own assigned spots, and they tossed the dirt outside the holes as they dug. However, the boy digging next to Stanley kept throwing dirt into Stanley's hole. Stanley told him to be a little more careful, but the boy and his friends just laughed at Stanley, and they continued making fun of him. As Stanley worked, he started thinking about one of his ancestors. It was a story he had heard from his grandfather. That ancestor's name was Elia. Elia had worked on a pig farm for many years, and while working there, he fell deeply in love with Myra, the farm owner's daughter. She was considered the most beautiful girl in town. One day, Elia went to visit a woman named Madame Zeroni. She was known for being able to predict the future. Elia asked Madame Zeroni what he should do to win a girl's heart. He wanted to know how he could make the girl he loved fall in love with him. Madame Zeroni told him that the first thing he needed to do was stop obsessing over love. He needed to put all those thoughts aside and move forward with his life. Then Madame Zeroni advised him to move to America, because she believed he could build a great future there, and once he became successful, any girl would be crazy about him. But Elia did not want to leave Myra behind. Instead, he went directly to speak with the farm owner, Myra's father, because he wanted to ask for Myra's hand in marriage. But there was another boy there. He had also liked Myra for a long time, and that boy was wealthier than Elia. He had even given Myra's father several pigs as gifts. Because of that, Myra's father became more interested in him. He told Elia to stay away from his daughter, and he made it clear that he would never allow Myra to marry him. Elia was heartbroken, so he immediately went back to Madame Zeroni. He told her everything, explaining that Myra's father had rejected him because he was poor. He also said that Myra's father had chosen a rich boy for his daughter, and that he had been swayed by nothing more than a few pigs. Madame Zeroni felt very sorry for Elia after hearing his story. She had great sympathy for him. Then she gave him some advice. She told him to carry a pig up the mountain every day and give it water to drink. And while the pig was drinking, he should sing. He had to sing with all his heart. She said that after many days had passed, the little pig would grow bigger, and at the same time, all the pain in his heart would disappear. Elia could hardly believe that something like this could heal emotional pain, but since he had nothing else to do, he agreed to follow her advice. At that moment, Madame Zeroni told him one more thing. After all his pain was gone, he must carry her up the mountain as well and give her water to drink. And if Elia failed to do that, a terrible curse would fall upon his family line. Elia agreed to all of her conditions. He took the little pig and began climbing the mountain with it every day. And while giving it water, he sang exactly as Madame Zeroni had instructed. Spending time with the pig started to make him feel genuinely happy, and just as Madame Zeroni had said, his sadness slowly faded away. Over time, the pig grew very large. So Elia decided that he would give the grown pig to Myra's father as a gift, and then he would propose to Myra. Because of that, he went back to Myra's house once again. In front of Myra's father, Elia told Myra how much he had suffered for her. He told her everything he had done because he loved her, and he explained that he had brought his beloved pig as a gift for her father. But even after hearing all of that, Myra was still confused about whether she should marry Elia or the rich boy. Although Elia kept trying to explain how much he loved her, Myra seemed to share her father's love for money. That was why she kept bringing up the wealthy boy, even while considering Elia. She even turned the choice of her future husband into a guessing game. Elia immediately realized that he had spent all this time loving a foolish person, so he tore up the flowers he had brought for Myra, and right there, he gave up on his love for her. After that, he decided to follow Madame Zeroni's advice. He would go to America and build a career for himself. Within a short time, he got everything ready and left for America. But because he was so busy, he forgot something important. Madame Zeroni had told him that once all the pain in his heart was gone, he must carry her up the mountain and give her water, just as he had done for the pig. But Elia never did that. In fact, before leaving for America, he did not even meet Madame Zeroni one last time. Madame Zeroni was deeply hurt by this, so she placed a curse on Elia and his entire family line. And because of that curse, no one in their family had been able to achieve true success ever since. The story then returns to the present day, where Stanley and the other inmates were working. Just then, Mr. Sir arrived in a truck. It was the water truck. The inmates were given water once during their work period, so all the boys lined up to fill their bottle. At that moment, Stanley noticed that the skin on his hands had started peeling from all the digging. One of the boys saw it and made fun of him. He joked that if Stanley was already in this condition on his first day, he would never survive the days ahead. Today, the first person to finish digging his hole was Zero. Zero was actually an incredibly fast worker. One by one, the other inmates finished their work and headed back. And Stanley was the last one to finish, because he was completely new to this kind of work. So when he finally finished digging his hole, there was no one left to help him climb back out. So even after trying for a long time, Stanley could not climb out of the deep hole. But little by little, he had to learn how to get out on his own. Later that night, Stanley was sitting outside the camp. Just then, Mr. Sir walked over carrying a rifle. He pointed the gun in Stanley's direction. Stanley was terrified, but it turned out that Mr. Sir was actually aiming at a small lizard. However, he missed his shot, and the lizard immediately started moving towards Stanley. Just then, Mr. Sir fired again. This time, the lizard was killed. Everything about this place felt strange to Stanley. Although living there was very difficult at first, he slowly learned the camp's rule, and he gradually started adapting to life there. Now he woke up on his own every morning. For breakfast, he ate the same thin meal made from spoiled vegetables. Then, without talking to anyone, he quietly got ready for work. And he spent his time working without wasting a single moment. He also stopped paying attention to what other people said about him. But after digging 5-foot-deep holes day after day, both of his hands became badly injured. Because of that, working became very painful for him. And on top of everything else, he constantly had to deal with attacks from poisonous insects. Somehow, Stanley managed to protect himself from them. There was also a serious shortage of water at the camp. Sometimes, while taking a shower, the water would suddenly stop flowing before he had even finished rinsing off the soap, and he would be forced to leave without finishing his shower. On top of that, he also had to deal with the bullying from the other boys. Since he was new, they constantly picked on him, but Stanley never argued back. Sometimes they would take his food, sometimes they would take the shovel he wanted to use, and they found all kinds of other ways to make his life harder. Still, Stanley remained quiet and gentle. Because of his calm nature, everyone eventually gave him the nickname Caveman. They thought he was a very soft and easygoing kid. But that did not mean Stanley did not know how to stand up for himself. He simply did not want to create more conflict by fighting with them. More than anything, he just wanted to get through his 18 months at the camp and finally go back home. Fortunately, the camp allowed inmates to send letters to their families. So Stanley wrote a letter to his mother. In the letter, he told her that he was doing great. He said that he was not suffering at all. In fact, he wrote that life there felt more like a picnic than a punishment. He only wrote those things to make his mother happy. He did not want her to worry about him. He also told her that this difficult period would be over soon, and that they would have fun together again before long. The next day, while digging his hole, Stanley found a piece of charcoal that looked many years old. He immediately took it to Dr. Pendanski. The other boys also gathered around to look at it. However, Dr. Pendanski Pendanski told Stanley that Mr. Sir had no interest in pieces of charcoal. He said that if Stanley found something else, he should bring it in. Maybe that object could earn him a day or two off from work. After that, Dr. Pendanski explained something about the area. He told Stanley that the place they were standing in had not always been a desert. A long time ago, there had been a huge river surrounding the area, and this place had once looked like a small island. But over time, the river dried up completely. As a result, the land eventually turned into a desert. He also explained that the land surrounding the river had once belonged to the current warden's grandfather. The story then shifts into a flashback, where we see events that took place hundreds of years earlier. Back then, this desert-like area had been a thriving community. Thousands of people lived there. The land around the river produced rich and fertile crops. There were roads, schools, colleges, offices, courthouses, and everything else people needed. Because of that, the lives of many people revolved around this area. We are then introduced to a man named Sam. He was an onion farmer and merchant. He often came to this town to sell his onions at wholesale prices. He transported them in a wagon that was pulled by donkeys. Sam always claimed that his onions were not ordinary onion. According to him, they had powerful healing properties. He even said that his onions could cure serious diseases for which no medicine had yet been discovered. Sam would travel from place to place telling people these stories. In this lakeside town, there was also a young woman named Catherine. She worked as a school teacher, but Sam had liked Catherine for a long time. So whenever he came to town to promote his onions, he always brought her special foods made from onion. And in return, Catherine would give him a jar of preserves each time. It was considered a very special local treat. Catherine was also a very beautiful young woman at that time. Because of that, almost every man in town admired her. So no one liked seeing Catherine pay so much attention to Sam. As a result, many of them were jealous of him. One day, while Catherine was teaching her students at school, a heavy rainstorm began outside. Suddenly, water started dripping through a hole in the roof, so Catherine decided to dismiss all of the students for the day. As it happened, Sam was outside the school that day, so he stepped in and repaired the roof for her. Catherine thanked him for his help, and that gave them an excuse to spend some time talking. The two of them chatted for a long time. Meanwhile, Sam fixed several other parts of the school as well. He wanted to spend a little more time with Catherine, and just like that, his entire day passed while talking with her. Later that evening, Catherine was shown teaching a class for the adults in town. Many of the local young men attended those classes, and they often tried to flirt with her. Among them was a man named Walker. This man was actually the grandfather of the camp's current warden. Walker approached Catherine and asked her to meet him outside, but Catherine immediately turned him down. Walker became extremely angry. Meanwhile, Sam continued visiting Catherine's school regularly. Little by little, he worked to make the school more beautiful. He decorated it in different ways and improved the place whenever he could. And within a short time, Catherine's school looked much better than before. As time passed, a strong friendship developed between the two of them. Then one day, the donkey that pulled Sam's wagon suddenly went missing. So for several days, Sam was unable to visit Catherine. Because of that, he bought a boat, and he started traveling by river to see her. As time passed, the two of them gradually fell deeply in love. Then one night, Sam came to meet Catherine, and as the two of them grew closer to each other, Walker happened to see them together. So he immediately gathered his men and went into action. He spread rumors about them throughout the entire town. As a result, the townspeople came together and set fire to Catherine's house and even the school building. Catherine immediately ran to the police station, but the police officer there was drunk. Instead of helping her, he tried to take advantage of her. When Catherine pushed him away, the officer told her that everything was her fault. According to him, she had fallen in love with someone from a different race, and that, in his eyes, was a serious crime. He said she deserved to be punished for it, because, as he saw it, how could a black man dare to fall in love with a woman from their race? Hearing those words, Catherine became terrified, so she ran off to find Sam. She wanted to warn him about the danger, but by then, it was already too late. The townspeople had shot Sam and killed him, and his body was being carried away on a boat to some distant place. Catherine was devastated by his death. The pain changed her completely. The kind and gentle woman she once was seemed to disappear, Instead, she became obsessed with revenge. A few days later, she tracked down the police officer. She killed him, and before leaving, she kissed him, the very thing he had wanted from her while he was alive. From that point on, Catherine slowly became a notorious outlaw. Eventually, she became known as Kissin' Kate, the woman who killed people and left them with a kiss before walking away. The story then returns to the present day, where Stanley and several other inmates were digging holes. At that moment, X-Ray walked over to Stanley, and he told him that from now on, if Stanley found anything in the ground, he should bring it to him first. After that, when Stanley returned to the camp, a boy named Magnet got into a fight with him. He started saying all kinds of rude things to Stanley, but this time, Stanley did not stay quiet. He was ready to fight back. As the two of them started fighting, some of the other boys quickly stepped in and broke it up. And as Stanley slowly learned to stand up for himself, the others began to respect him. Everyone realized that even though Stanley was polite, he knew how to defend himself when necessary. Because of that, the other boys gradually started accepting him, and little by little, Stanley found his place among them. Before, he always had to stand at the very end of the line whenever they lined up for water, but now, he was getting his turn much sooner. As time passed, Stanley also became friends with a boy named Armpit, and before long, Armpit became Stanley's best friend. A few days later, Stanley received a letter from his mother. In the letter, she told him that all of his father's experiments had failed. Their financial situation had become so bad that they could barely afford to live. In fact, if they could not pay the rent, their landlord might throw them out of the house at any time. While Stanley was reading the letter, Zero walked over to him. Since Zero could not read, the whole thing seemed very interesting to him. When Stanley read the letter out loud, Zero asked if Stanley could teach him how to read and write. He wanted to learn so that he could read for himself one day, but Stanley told him that he was not a very good teacher, and after working all day, he was usually too exhausted to spend time teaching anyone. The next day, while digging his hole, Stanley found a small metal object. The letters K and B were engraved on it. When Stanley showed it to the others, they thought it looked like the casing from a shotgun shell, but it seemed much thinner than that. Just then, X-Ray came over and snatched it from Stanley. He immediately took it to Dr. Pendanski. Dr. Pendanski became very excited when he saw it. He quickly informed Mr. Sir about the discovery, and Mr. Sir immediately reported it to the warden. The warden arrived at the site right away. Everyone was shocked to see that the warden was not a man at all. Instead, she was a very beautiful woman. When the warden saw the object, she looked extremely pleased. She gave X-Ray the rest of the day off as a reward. Then she ordered all the other inmates to dig up that entire area, because there was a chance that many more objects like that might be buried in the same area. As a result, all of the boys had to work much harder than usual that day. But even after digging through the entire area, they found nothing else, because the object had originally been discovered in Stanley's section. For the next several days, all of the inmates continued digging in that same spot. Little by little, they created a huge excavation site. But after all that work, the only thing they found was a single tile. So the warden eventually told them to go back to their normal routine and to continue doing the same work they had been doing before. The next day, while Mr. Sir was handing out water to the inmates, one of the boys walked up to his truck. When he got the chance, he secretly stole some sunflower seeds from inside it. After Mr. Sir finished distributing water and drove away, the boy shared the seeds with everyone else. But unfortunately, after driving a short distance, Mr. Sir realized that a large number of his sunflower seeds were missing. So he turned the truck around and came back. The moment the boys saw Mr. Sir returning, they panicked, and they quickly tried to hide the seed. Unfortunately, some of the seeds fell onto the ground right next to Stanley, so Stanley hurriedly tried to bury them in the dirt. But Mr. Sir caught him in the act. When Mr. Sir demanded an explanation, Stanley lied. He claimed that he was the one who had stolen the seed. In reality, the theft had been committed by his best friend, Armpit, but Stanley took the blame to protect his friend. Everyone was shocked to see that Stanley had told such a big lie for someone else. After that, Mr. Sir took Stanley to the warden's office to be punished. While standing there, Stanley noticed several pictures of Kissin' Kate hanging inside the office. Meanwhile, the warden sat there applying nail polish. As she painted her nails, she kept showing Stanley the color. She explained that the polish had been made using venom from a very rare snake, and because of that, It was extremely valuable. Then the time came for Stanley's punishment. But instead of hitting Stanley, the warden suddenly slapped Mr. Sir across the face. She slapped him so hard that Mr. Sir fell to the ground because he had stopped Stanley from working over something as minor as a few sunflower seeds. After that, the warden told Stanley to go back and continue his work. When Stanley returned to the digging site, everyone treated him like a hero because he had risked getting into trouble to protect someone else. That was a truly selfless thing to do, and his actions had earned everyone's respect. Zero was especially impressed. In fact, he had already finished the rest of Stanley's work for him. Stanley was very grateful for that, and because of it, he finally agreed to teach Zero how to read and write. Zero was extremely happy. Later, when Mr. Sir arrived at the camp that day, a large scratch mark could be seen across his cheek. It had been caused by the warden's fingernails. Because of that, Mr. Sir was furious with Stanley. From that day on, he stopped giving Stanley water. Even when Stanley begged for just a little water after working all day, Mr. Sir refused to give him any. While digging that day, Stanley kept thinking about everything that had happened. He thought about the warden's behavior. He thought about the pictures of Kissin' Kate hanging in her office. And he thought about the object he had found buried in the dirt. Then he came to a realization. The object might actually have been a lipstick tube that once belonged to Kissin' Kate. And since the warden seemed obsessed with appearance and cosmetics, she probably considered it very valuable. The story then shifts back into a flashback. By that time, Kissin' Kate had become a famous outlaw, but she only targeted the people who had been responsible for Sam's death, and those who had burned down her house and school. After that, Kate began robbing treasure and valuable possession. The first Stanley in Stanley's family line was also one of her victims. She stole his fortune. Then she killed him and buried him in the very place where the prison camp now stood. One day, while Kate was resting in that area, Walker and his wife arrived. The two of them pointed guns at her and demanded that she hand over her treasure. They had become completely obsessed with money. Many years had passed since Sam's death. Walker had gotten married and started a new life. But after Sam was killed, the entire town had slowly fallen apart. Eventually, even the river dried up, and the once thriving area turned into a desert. Because of that, money had become extremely scarce in the area. Kate could have killed both of them right then and there, but she wanted them to suffer instead of dying quickly. So she deliberately allowed a poisonous lizard to bite her hand. The venom killed her on the spot. Kate did this because she wanted to make sure Walker would never find her treasure. She wanted him and all of his descendants to spend their lives searching for it until the day they died. And even if they never found the treasure, poverty itself would slowly destroy them. To Kate, that was the greatest punishment she could give them. In the present day, the warden of the camp was one of Walker's descendants. That is why she was still searching for Kissin' Kate's hidden treasure, and that was the real reason she had built the camp. By forcing the inmates to dig holes, she hoped to find the treasure much more easily. We then returned to Stanley. By now, he was teaching Zero how to read and write every day, and one day, Stanley learned Zero's real name. His real name was Hector Zeroni, which meant that Zero was a descendant of Madame Zeroni, the same woman who had cursed Elia Yelnats. Since Zero was the fastest digger in the camp, he always finished his own hole first. After finishing his work, he would help Stanley dig his hole as well. The other boys became very jealous when they saw this, and sometimes they would deliberately throw dirt back into Stanley's hole. One day, Zero told Stanley about his mother. He explained how much she had sacrificed for him, but one day, she suddenly disappeared. No matter how hard he searched, he could never find her again, and from that point on, he had to survive on the streets by himself. Hearing this story made Stanley feel deeply sorry for him. The next day, while Stanley was working, one of the boys came over and started insulting him. The others were jealous because of the friendship between Stanley and Zero, but this time, Stanley stood up for himself. Just then, Dr. Pendansky arrived. Instead of stopping the argument, he began encouraging the two boys to fight. As a result, a fight broke out between them. They started hitting each other hard, but after a while, the other boy began overpowering Stanley. When Zero saw this happening, he rushed over to help him. He attacked the boy so fiercely that the boy was nearly beaten to death, but at that moment, Dr. Pendanski fired a shot into the air to stop the fight. As soon as news of the incident reached the camp, the warden immediately came to the scene. She demanded to know why the fight had started. The other boys quickly began blaming Stanley. They told the warden that Stanley only dug half of his hole and then had Zero do the rest of the work for him. But Stanley defended himself. He explained that he helped Zero in return. He taught him how to read and write. Hearing that, Dr. Pendanski burst out laughing. Then he started insulting Zero. He called him stupid, worthless, and a complete idiot. Zero was deeply hurt by those words. In a fit of anger, he swung his shovel and struck Dr. Pendanski. Then he immediately took off running into the desert. Mr. Sir started chasing after him, but the warden stopped him. She said that Zero could go wherever he wanted, because even if he disappeared, there was nobody in the world who would come looking for him. She even said they would delete all of his records from the camp. They would create paperwork that made it look as if Zero had never been there at all. That night, Stanley could not stop worrying about Zero. The boys spent the evening talking about all the different ways someone could die in such a brutal desert. Then Stanley suddenly remembered something. When Kissin' Kate had robbed his ancestor, Stanley I, he had been stranded in this very desert. Yet he had somehow survived there for 16 days. The reason was that he had found a place where he could stay alive. If Zero managed to find that same place, he might still have a chance. The problem was that nobody knew where it was, and Stanley I had never been able to tell anyone. By the time rescuers finally found him, he had already lost his sanity. The next day, another boy around Zero's age arrived at the camp. He was a troublemaker who constantly annoyed Stanley. Meanwhile, Stanley had already made up his mind to go looking for Zero. So later that day, when Mr. Sir arrived to distribute water, Stanley saw an opportunity. He jumped into Mr. Sir's truck and tried to escape. Mr. Sir attempted to stop him, but Stanley shoved him aside, causing him to fall into a hole. Unfortunately, the distraction caused Stanley to lose control of the truck. The vehicle crashed into one of the holes and got stuck. Even then, Stanley refused to give up. He got out and started running across the desert, and as the other inmates watched him escape, they began shouting and yelling behind him. Everyone at the camp was cheering for Stanley that day. They admired what he had done, and when the warden learned that Stanley had escaped, she said that they would inform his family after 2 weeks. By then, she believed his body would probably have been found in the desert. Meanwhile, Stanley kept moving forward under the scorching sun. Then suddenly, he spotted an old boat in the distance. The boat had once belonged to Sam. After the lake dried up, it had been left abandoned in the middle of the desert, and it was underneath this boat that Zero had been hiding since the previous day. Zero was overjoyed when he saw Stanley. He could not believe that Stanley had come looking for him, but both of them were starving, so they searched through the boat. Inside, they found several jars of peaches. These were the same peaches that Kate had once preserved. Even after all those years, they had not spoiled, so the two boys ate the peaches and satisfied their hunger. While they were there, Stanley noticed a mountain in the distance. Near the top, it had a rock formation shaped like a giant thumb. After taking a closer look, Stanley realized that this might be the very place where Stanley I had once survived. The two boys decided to climb the mountain and seek shelter there. It was an incredibly difficult climb. At one point, Stanley nearly fell off the mountain, but Zero managed to save him by using his shovel to pull him back up. Then the two of them continued climbing. Eventually, Zero became so exhausted that he could not take another step. He told Stanley to leave him behind and keep going alone, but Stanley refused. Instead, he lifted Zero onto his back, and with tremendous effort, he continued climbing upward. In doing so, he unknowingly repeated what his ancestor Elia had once done. Long ago, Elia had carried a pig up a mountain every day to give it water, and this was the very same mountain. After climbing much higher, Stanley finally spotted patches of green vegetation. He also discovered a source of fresh water. Nearby, there were rows of onions growing. Starving, Stanley immediately began eating the onion, and he gave some to Zero as well. Fortunately, these onions were descendants of Sam's special onions, the same onions that were believed to have powerful healing properties. After eating them, both boys felt much stronger. As Stanley continued eating, he began singing a song without even realizing. It was a song he had heard from his family his entire life, and it was actually the same song that Elia used to sing while carrying the pig up the mountain to drink water. Without knowing it, Stanley had finally fulfilled the promise that Elia had failed to keep, and by helping a descendant of Madame Zeroni, he had unknowingly broken the curse that had haunted his family for generations. He had even carried him up the mountain and helped him drink water there. Because of that, Madame Zeroni's spirit finally found peace, and the curse on Stanley's family was lifted. At that very same moment, Stanley's father finally succeeded with his research. He created a spray made from a combination of onions and peaches, and amazingly, it actually worked. The spray was able to eliminate shoe odor completely. The entire family was overjoyed and started celebrating. Meanwhile, Zero confessed something to Stanley. He told him that he was actually the one who had stolen the shoes that got Stanley sent to the camp. At the time, Zero desperately needed a pair of shoes. The baseball player had donated those shoes to the orphanage where Zero was living, but Zero had no idea how famous the shoes were. After stealing them, he learned that the police were searching for the thief. He got scared and threw the shoes off a bridge. That was how Stanley ended up getting blamed for the crime. Then, the very next day, Zero was caught trying to steal another pair of shoes. After hearing the story, Stanley simply laughed. He told Zero that everything had happened because it was meant to happen. There was no point in worrying about the past anymore. Meanwhile, Stanley's lawyer arrived at the camp. The police had already discovered evidence proving that Stanley was innocent, but the warden kept making excuses and tried to send the lawyer away. Before leaving, however, the lawyer made one thing very clear. The next time he came back, he would bring officials from a higher court with him. After resting for a while, Stanley and Zero ran back to the place where Stanley had found the lipstick tube belonging to Kissin' Kate, because they believed there might be treasure buried there. The two of them spent the entire night digging. Eventually, deep beneath the ground, they discovered a large treasure chest. It contained all of Kissin' Kate's hidden treasure. But just then, the noise attracted the warden and Mr. Sir. They rushed to the site immediately. Before they could do anything, however, dozens of poisonous insects and deadly lizards surrounded Stanley and Zero. They even surrounded the treasure chest. It almost looked as if they were protecting both the boys and the treasure. The warden decided to wait. She believed that the creatures would soon kill Stanley and Zero, and then the treasure would belong to her. A flashback then reveals that when the warden's grandfather was searching for the treasure, he used to make the young warden dig holes on her days off in hopes of finding it. The next morning arrived, but surprisingly, the insects and lizards had not harmed Stanley or Zero at all. At that moment, Stanley's lawyer returned. This time, he brought several officials with him. Realizing she was in trouble, the warden immediately started making up lies about Stanley and Zero. He says that those two had supposedly stolen the chest from his office, and that the chest belongs to him. But Zero then shows everyone the name Stanley written on the chest, because the original owner of this treasure chest was Stanley's ancestor. Kissin' Kate had looted the treasure from him. This proves that both of them are innocent. After that, the lawyer puts the chest in his car, and when he is about to leave with Stanley, Stanley says that he will not go anywhere without Zero. So the officers there ask to check Zero's file to see how much sentence time he has left. But they had already destroyed all of Zero's files. The officer then orders the other police to investigate the matter. After a few hours of investigation, it is revealed that Mr. Sir is actually a fugitive criminal, and Dr. Pend is not a doctor at all. Instead, both of them had been working there under fake identities all this time. Because of such a huge fraud in the prison, the warden is also found guilty. As a result, all three of them are arrested. After that, Stanley returns home with Zero, and the government returns Stanley's family property to them. When Stanley's family receives all this treasure, they are extremely happy. There were also many property documents there. Stanley then offers Zero a share of the property as well. His family also gives Zero some share of the wealth. With that money, Zero hires some detectives, and within a few days, he manages to find his mother, whom whom he had lost many years ago. Mother and son are reunited and become very happy. After that, the families of Stanley and Zero start living in the same area as neighbors in peace and happiness. Meanwhile, the dangerous prison is shut down. All the prisoners are sent to counseling and are released. They also occasionally come to visit Zero and Stanley. And meanwhile, Stanley's father's research becomes so successful that the advertisement for his product is now directed by the same baseball player whose shoes were stolen, which led to Stanley's imprisonment. In the end, everything becomes completely fine for Stanley and his family. Everyone lives together in peace and happiness, and with a beautiful ending, the story comes to an end.